All right, Alexander, let's answer the questions from the live stream we did with Robert Barnes. And let's start things off with Red Viking. Barnes is the king of based. Thank you, Red Viking. Skeptic says, the crime is being Donald Trump. I fail to understand how you are shocked. Alexander, how you are shocked, Alexander.
Well, I mean, you've got a good point. The reason I am shocked is because, well, I had a conception of America and of its legal system and of the way the whole thing works there, that clearly anybody, even, a gangster like Al Capone or whatever, was entitled to due process and right to justice. It seems I was wrong. It seems that today's United States, the United States where Joe Biden is president and Merrick Garland is his attorney general, doesn't work like that anymore. And that is why I'm shocked.
J.H. Scott 6 says, always glad to hear the Duran and Attorney Barnes. Thank you for that. Paulina, thank you for that super sticker. Amir says, Kenneth Starr will be turning in his grave.
Yeah, probably.
Not a banned account says, will Trump be tried for working for Russia next?
Possibly. I mean, whatever they can come up with, they will invent. I mean, working for Russia, no actual connection, no money, no contacts. But you see, Putin and Trump communicate by some mysterious means of telepathy or thought control. So, you can always construct any kind of fantasy that you want. I mean, that seems to be where the US is heading.
Sparky says, Alvin Bragg tests limit of suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good way of putting it, by the way.
Nino, PMC says, Robert, you are an amazing attorney. Can you push and try to get Trump's legal team to help him win his legal battles? Also, when Trump is president again, would you accept an AG position?
Well, I think these are the last. I don't think even Robert will want to answer. Actually, not at this point. I mean, if you say that you want to accept it, even if you want it, then you're perhaps less likely to get it. Is all I can say is. But I really do believe that Donald Trump should listen to what Robert is saying. Actually. It seems to me he's absolutely right. All the points that Robert is making are absolutely right about the legal team. I think that this is a constitutional law issue, exactly as Robert says, and it needs to be fought and explained in exactly that way. And, getting ordinary attorneys, even good attorneys, to take this on is to give too much credit in some ways to this indictment. I mean, the person who said before that this is a suspension of disbelief, I think that person is even more right than he realises. I mean, this is such a bizarre indictment. Any lawyer reading it can see how bizarre it is, that it's actually dangerous. You need the kind of lawyers that Robert was talking about.
Not a banned account says, which MAGA criminals will be prosecuted next?
None. None should be prosecuted because they're not criminals. That's the first thing to say. No evidence of crime. This indictment doesn't provide any actual evidence of an actual crime. It's trying to elevate alleged misdemeanors into felonies using a theory which only Bragg seems to understand, because I don't. I really don't. And, everyone else, we're talking about MAGA people, what criminals? Where are the criminals there? Show me the criminals, the criminal activities that these MAGA people are supposed to have done.
Inisfad says, what does Barnes think about the U.S. involvement in the protests in Israel and attempt to unseat Netanyahu?
Well, I don't know what Robert thinks. I mean, this is an internal problem in Israel. It looks like it's becoming an increasingly polarised country. And I have to say, this is my belief. I've no direct evidence of this. But Netanyahu and Biden famously don't get on with each other. There's some concerns about the fact that Netanyahu historically has been friendly with Putin and the Russians. I've seen ample evidence that the Mossad was involved. The Mossad has intimate connections with the US intelligence community. I have to say that it does look to me as if the hand of our friends in Washington is also involved in this affair.
Ricardo Alfonso says, a show about espionage and Operation Gladio, which ties in with what's happening now. Jay Dyer does very good research on this. Maybe have him on.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to get Jay Dyer on. And Not a Band Account says, is Israel still the United States' greatest ally?
That's a very good question. I think that they remain allies and very strong allies. That doesn't mean that the leaderships of the two countries like or respect each other. And that may be a problem going forward.
Elena Diaz says, is only me that has the feeling that it seems that even people from the USA are tired of the rules-based order?
No, you're not. You're absolutely right. You're not alone in thinking that. Many people are thinking of that. Many people in the United States are thinking that too. But that makes those who remain committed to the rules-based international order, otherwise known as the hegemony of the political class in Washington and their allies, not the United States. We should always make that distinction between the United States as a country and this group of people at the centre of power. That makes them even more determined to cling on and defend it.
Yeah. Novus Black says, all hail to Alexander's Bridge Company. Stocks are strong.
Oh, they're booming.
Let's see. Carolyn J. says, regarding Ukraine, according to former German politician Willy Wimmer, the State Department told the European allies that the U.S. would kick Russia out of Europe shortly after the Yugoslavia war in 2000.
It's true. It's not. That's not a. I mean, I've heard that from several people that this has already been talked about all the way back in 1999, and especially. When there was the political crisis in Russia, which eventually led to Yeltsin's resignation and Putin's emergence as the new president.
Yeah. Elza says, guilty until proven innocent can also be called Pelosi law.
No, absolutely. Wonderfully put.
Yeah. Algebra instructor says, a thruple, Gonzalo Lira, Viva, and now the Duran. Today's a good day. I'm a Naval Museum historian and have been trying to save as much as I can over the past several years for others to learn from. History is not kind.
Thank you for those kind words and that excellent comment.
Yeah. Not a Band Account says, are most Russian citizens in support of the war?
Well, we have multiple opinion polls, and they not only show they are, but they show that Putin's trust rating stands at 80%. And this includes polls taken by Levada, which is an anti-Putin and anti-government polling agency in Russia, which has historically received funding from the West.
Sad Ferret, thank you for that super sticker. Pasha Moyer says, these are such interesting times that even the Babylon Bee is struggling to create satire that isn't already reality.
It's true. It's absolutely true.
Maria S., thank you for that super sticker. Nino PMC says, Alexander, we keep hearing about UA building up forces in certain regions. The RU forces see them amassing. Why aren't the RU military using missile strikes and drones to reduce them? Why let them build and counter?
Right. The explanation is that when you hear about a build-up of forces by Ukraine, that doesn't mean that they're all together in one place. That means that they're dispersed over actually what is a fairly wide area. So, yes, if the Russians had uncontrolled control of the air and could conduct the kind of aerial campaign over Ukraine that the United States did in Iraq, over Iraq in 1991, they could do that, but it would probably still take a couple of weeks. Russia still doesn't have that full control over Ukrainian airspace, because there is still some vestiges left of a Ukrainian air defense system. But it's not something you can do easily and quickly. You can't just send the odd missile in and kill lots of Ukrainian soldiers because, as I said, they're dispersed. They're not going to concentrate them in one place.
1234 Ace says, huge respect for Robert Barnes, someone I highly admire, the cutting edge of wholesome political commentary and insight. Always feel sharper after listening. Top guest.
Yes, agreed.
Amir Ashrafinya says, the Democrats want to face Trump in 24 rather than DeSantis. That's why they're doing this.
I think they're making a huge mistake. I think Trump is a much more formidable adversary than DeSantis. This is my own personal view. I think he's got much more traction with far more people across the United States than DeSantis does. That's not to deny DeSantis' appeal and political skills, but I don't think he's in the same class as Trump.
Teresa says, 3 of my favorite people. Hey, Barnes, did you see that Massey is supporting DeSantis? What do you think? I'm so disappointed in my favorite congressman.
I think there's nothing more we can say about that. Yeah.
Zariel says, Robert, what are the ramifications, purely hypothetically speaking, if Trump were convicted? Will this open up a whole new era of indicting other ex-POTUSes?
I
Clinton,
think
Obama, Biden have more dirt on them than sewer rats.
I think Robert's actually answered that question in effect, maybe not directly. But yes, it will. It will do exactly that. We will have a free-for-all going around indicting ex-presidents, potentially also impeaching ex-presidents. Remember, that precedent has already been made now. So this is an extremely bad idea, but Robert made the point. There was a convention that you do not indict ex-presidents for precisely this reason. And now the Democrats have done it. So they've created that precedent.
Elena says, I wonder, do normal everyday U.S. citizens have any use or gain or joy of their federal government nowadays? It seems all a waste of money for the less of two evils they can't even influence.
I agree with that view. I mean, I don't really see what the federal government is doing at the moment, other than its, shall we say, its residual legacy functions like, Medicaid and Medicare and all that, which, belong to another era, basically. But, if you're talking about the new things it is doing now, I don't see anything good coming out of the Biden administration, and that's my own view, and I don't really see any sign that that's going to change anytime soon.
Sparky says, I owned an engineering firm, and engineering services was a catch-all on our invoices for services not clearly categorized.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the kind of... You've made a very good point, actually, because if this case ever goes to trial, which I still... I mean, the idea of it, it still causes me... I still reel at the thought of it. You're going to end up with these kind of questions. What's a business expense? What's an election expense? Things that have never been defined properly and for good reason. And we're going to be finding ourselves in all kinds of, debates about, the equivalent of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin type argument over this sort of thing.
Sage and Fool says, does Barnes have faith in Trump's legal team? I think Barnes...
He's clearly got concerns.
Yeah. Stephen, thank you for that super chat. Tree3 Climber says, another GOAT podcast. David Martin says, should Trump campaign on bringing back a gold standard in the U.S.?
I don't think he will. And I'm not sure that it would be a good idea for him to do so. Because I think if he started taking that line, you'd get sort of phalanxes of economists that would challenge it. And I think that would lead to a rather esoteric discussion about gold standards and financial policies and monetary policies, which, to be honest, I think some people in America would be very interested in, but I doubt the majority would. And I think the better way to win elections is to talk about jobs, houses, immigration, gun control in America, which is an important topic there, those sort of topics, that really concern Americans, rather than, as I said, these rather more abstract topics that we're talking about now. Of course, if we have a financial crisis, if we have inflation at 20, 50, 100%, that kind of thing, well, then people do start to become interested in gold standard questions. But at the moment, as I said, other than the kind of people who discuss things on the Duran, I don't think this is something that the critical mass of Americans is really very engaged in.
Tatone says, question for all three of you. What odds do you place on the judge moving the venue to Staten Island? They want the Manhattan lynch mob jury, but would be very embarrassing in the court of public opinion.
Well, Robert has suggested that Trump apply for it, and I think one should always apply for anything that makes sense, and it's a way also of highlighting that a Manhattan jury is simply not to be trusted in this kind of case. But my own personal view, I'm going to say it straightforwardly, is that he's going to fail because the judge in this case, who is absolutely thick as thieves with Bragg, will want to keep the case in Manhattan.
Mehdi says, if our legal system is this set up to favor the Washington, D.C. establishment over the private citizens, are we still a democracy? If not, does the law even apply anymore?
You're absolutely correct about that. That's a very, very good point. Let's be absolutely clear about this. Democracy depends on the rule of law. If the rule of law, if orderly legal government founded in the United States on the Constitution no longer exists because the rule of law has been basically thrown out of the window and the law is being used as a mechanism, an instrument in political conflict, then democracy can no longer exist. It is as big an issue as that.
Sad Ferret, thank you for that super chat. Margarita Dubrovina, thank you for that super chat. Tyler Durden says, excellent pod. Thanks, gents. Sparky says, maybe Trump could be prosecuted for sending a Christmas card to the zoning board.
Of course. That goes without saying. That's the deepest, darkest, most evil crime that anybody could possibly commit, especially if they're Donald Trump.
Jeff Pearson says, Trump is 100% transparent, sometimes by accident. But he isn't evil. He is the most honest politician we have.
I completely agree. I think you've got it absolutely right. Donald Trump has many flaws. People talk about them all the time. Sometimes people exaggerate the flaws that he does have. But there is absolutely nothing sinister about him. Nothing at all. With Donald Trump, what you see is what you get. I've come to that realization years ago. There is no dark secret hidden away in Trump's life. And that is remarkable. That's amazing. There are very, very few people in this world about whom you could say that. You could certainly not say that about many politicians. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, why they're so hostile to him.
Nikki Ball says, is Bellingcat simply a private company up for hire or a simple tool of British deep state?
Second.
Zarael says, once all is said and done, in my honest opinion, this is going to backfire so nasty in the Dems' faces that they're going to all be brown-faced after this.
I hope you are right. On balance, I think you are right. But it would be a mistake not to take this thing very seriously. It is so absurd. It is so ludicrous that I am worried about it. I mean, it seems to me that bringing a prosecution of this kind, it looks so crazy that, I do wonder what's going on behind the scenes.
Clarence M., thank you for that super chat. Triumph 951,000 says, this country doesn't deserve Donald Trump. Dimitri.
Well, don't go that far. I mean, there's a lot of people in America, and we shouldn't confuse the whole country with the political class in Washington and their sidekicks in New York and those places.
Dimitri, thank you for that super sticker. Irina Bruns, thank you for that super sticker. Janice, thank you for that super chat. Not a Band Account says, how long would Trump spend in prison if convicted?
I can't believe that we're even having to discuss these kind of questions because since there is no crime, how can I answer it? I mean, it's illogical. I mean, I cannot. I mean, if he's sent to prison for one day, that is too long. I mean, because there's no crime. I mean, you can't put a number on. You can't put a number on a case that's zero.
Elena says, U.S. people don't understand that liberals are historically on the right and the natural enemies of the left.
Well, I take your point. Of course, there's liberals and liberals, and then most people in America wouldn't see it in that way. But I know the point that you're making, that the left, as it existed in the United States and in Europe, was absolutely antithetical to the kind of liberals that we see today. But you're making a point about a left that no longer exists as a political force, either in the United States or anywhere else in Europe, to any real extent anymore.
Algebra instructor says, people forget that a classical Democrat is JFK was a textbook example, and DJT. That's how far society has fallen. Anti-war, anti-big business, etc.
You're completely right. I mean, that comes back to the question that was made before. Robert Kennedy Jr. is a throwback to the Democratic Party and what it represented in his uncle's day. What JFK and Robert Kennedy Sr. were all about. It's not the Democratic Party we have now.
ThinkPad20 says, if elected, Trump must set up a thorough, independent, and transparent investigation of 9/11, the crime of the century.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that. And there needs to be a thorough investigation of Russiagate, not this Durham investigation. Remember him? Whatever happened to Durham? He's still investigating. We have to have a proper, thorough investigation with evidence given in public, on oath. The same, by the way, for 9/11, the same for all of them, as happened in the 70s.
Not Intimidated says, I guess this would be a good time to say RFK Jr. did not kill himself.
Oh, yes. Okay, let's not talk about these things. Let's not talk about them. Because I always worry, and this is the Greek in me, that talking about things like that makes them happen.
Paulie says, Dutch cabinet will accelerate the nitrogen reduction despite their defeat in the midterm elections. Agenda 2030 is guiding principle. Bye-bye.
Yes, you're totally right. You're completely correct about this. Then the more they lose votes, the more they dig in. That is the response of the political class in the West everywhere. And they do so in the knowledge that even if they do lose, the people who will take over will be like themselves and will do the same thing. And that's the crisis of democracy in the West today.
Kyung Anderson, thank you for that super sticker. Strana M says, thoughts on Trump picking RFK Jr. for Attorney General?
That is not impossible. I don't know whether RFK Jr. would want it.
Martin Middle says, why arrest Trump for nothing while letting the Skipper Gilligan and Marianne, who bombed the Nord Stream, go free? Where is a Nord Stream investigation?
Well, completely right. I mean, where is the Nord Stream investigation? Where are the questions in Congress? Where are the questions in the media? I mean, it's omerta all over again.
Osak says, the U.S. is at risk of becoming a banana republic.
Yes, absolutely, and worse than that.
Mobius Zero says, why is our government just trying to get us all killed by every country that has nukes, Russia, China, North Korea? The American government has no regards for the lives of Americans, let alone others.
This is entirely correct. We're closer, in my opinion, conceptually, to a nuclear war than we have ever been. I mean, the way some people are talking, one gets the sense that, they're not afraid of a nuclear war anymore. They're prepared to get into an armed clash with China. They're not that far from getting into an armed clash with the Russians. And the fear of it, which was so powerful in my lifetime, seems to have evaporated amongst the leadership, so much of the leadership in the West.
Sticky Marks says, an innocent man is in jail for not giving up his sources with recent events. The truth will set Assange and us free. God will be the judge. Thanks.
I agree with that. You know, there's that famous phrase in the Bible, I can't remember exactly where, I think it's in one of the Psalms, where, you know, God says, vengeance will be mine, I will repay.
Zariel says, Robert Barnes, question 2, what would happen hypothetically in the USA if they took out RFK Jr. too? Would it cause the total eruption and civil war? Just asking.
Yes, I've already said I don't like to discuss these topics. I think if that calamity were to happen, the consequences would be unimaginable. But I really don't want to go there. I don't want to anticipate something like that. I am sure, by the way, that the Secret Service, who everything I've heard about them, it's about one institution left. It seems to work quite well in America, in the state, in the government. I think they will be determined not to let a thing like that happen.
Colberry says, finally managed to catch a live stream. You guys are amazing. Thank you for your work. Thank you for that. Gabrielle McMillan says, Sergey Brin is a neo-Trotskyite. Explains everything. China has all the most anti-Russian leaders in the U.S. on its payroll. Think about it. Google decides elections.
Yeah, all fairly good points, actually. Yeah, very good points.
Freedom Lover says, is that why Obama is moving to Kenya? Extradition.
Is he? I didn't know that he was moving.
I don't know.
I didn't know anything about this.
Yeah. Ricardo Alfonso says, I dispute the SS Minnow theory. My intel points clearly to Emilio Largo running the Nord Stream bombing out of his Disco Volante. It's kitted out for this type of operation.
This is, of course, Thunderball, one of those James Bond films. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That's very good, actually.
Has Aldin with massive pain, how would you fix the U.S. judicial system? What would be a good strategy towards this?
First of all, you need a proper Attorney General. And the other thing you need to do is you need to do a complete change of the Justice Department. The Justice Department bureaucracy, it is clear to me, is totally out of control. And I personally think you should break up the FBI. The FBI also is out of control. Now, you do that, obviously you're dealing with the federal part of the legal system. But if you start with the federal system, then you can start to do things eventually with the systems at state level. You know, somebody said before that, you know, Donald Trump's crime is that he's Donald Trump. You know, there was a country where that actually was the legal theory, the accepted legal theory, and that was in Stalin's Soviet Union. The Attorney General there was a man called Vyshinsky. And he said, you know, you don't care about evidence. What you care about is the defendant. If the defendant is, you know, an inappropriate or bad person, then he's guilty. You don't need to worry about things like evidence and law anymore. And that's where we've reached with the United States in some places, in parts of the legal system. You know, Vyshinsky is basically running it now.
Jerry says, don't underestimate the Republican voters' ability to vote for RFK Jr. in each state's primary for the sole purpose of taking out Biden.
Well, there's an interesting idea. Well, we'll see.
Deep Thought says, can America come back from this level of corruption? Has any nation done so?
Yes, I think it can. And, you know, let's not underestimate the regenerative powers of the US. It's been on the mat. Also, it's seen on numerous occasions, and it's pulled itself back. So, yes, I think it can. But the crisis is very great, and it's getting worse. And the time is not unlimited.
ThinkBad20 says, Ledin analyzed the role of banks under international capitalism exceedingly well in his imperialism book. He's been proven right in countless ways.
You know, lots of people have lots of things to say about Lenin. But you're absolutely correct. That book, Imperialism, the Higher Stage of Capitalism, it's well, certainly the best thing, in my opinion, that Lenin ever wrote. And it is really an extraordinary piece of analysis.
Aaron says, did you cover what's happening in Israel right now?
Yes, we have talked about it, yeah.
Life of Brian says, the dollar will remain a reserve, but its usage will slowly give way to bilateral trade agreements. It will lose value and atrophy.
Yes, I agree. I think you're making a good point. I think that it will not just collapse tomorrow as a reserve currency. It will gradually erode away. That's what happened with sterling. And then what happens is that as it erodes, step by step by step by step, suddenly, and this is what happened with sterling in the 60s, people rush out of it because they don't see the purpose of keeping their money in it any longer. So this is going to be one of those processes which is going to be slowish and then sudden.
The professional says, listening in background mode, I jerk my face from the screen and think, who is this guy? Summer of 1970 says, another great show, thanks Duran. J. Galt, 1776 says, Beyond odd, the DS adjacent media is pushing de-dollarization narratives. Presumably, they should treat it like Nord Stream 2 bombing, ignore and deceive, laying the groundwork for digital currency.
I mean, you may be right. I still can't help but think that the powers that be in the United States would not want to see the dollar to lose reserve status, even if it's operated through the euro-dollar system that Robert was talking about. I don't think that they will just want to see it go. It's too much part of US power. I think that the digital dollar idea is part of the mechanisms that are intended both to strengthen the dollar as a reserve currency and also to use again the reserve currency status of the dollar to control people even more.
Pete Cooper says, how far away is the new fiat dollar system? You answered that.
I think I have, yeah.
Okay, so that Shifu Ognichi says, this period reminds me of the 1940s and 70s. The Western countries are fighting against the tide of history, just like they were fighting independence.
Yeah.
Sparky says, the destruction of the euro slows down the slide of the dollar.
That is true. And of course, our friend Tom Longo thinks that that's what the interest rate increases in the United States are all about, that it's more about sustaining the position of the dollar and weakening the euro system than it is about fighting inflation. I think that's a complicated theory. I'm not entirely sold on it, I should say. But anyway, that's what he says. And I think in practical terms, you're right. When people look at the euro, they say, let's stick with the dollar. And the euro is, at the moment, a widely traded currency.
Nikki Ball says, the House of Representatives needs to trim the powers of the deep state and make them accountable so that brave individuals can dare to run for president.
I agree. But, present House of Representatives, narrow Republican majority, lots of rhinos. You're not going to see it from there at the moment. Might happen in time.
Darlene, thank you for that super sticker. And Ricardo Alfonso says, Doug McGregor and Tony Schaefer had a great interview about the quality of U.S. military leadership. They validate Tim Bacon.
Well, I agree with that. And I mean, I have to say, I've been reading some of the comments some U.S. generals have been making about the war in Ukraine. Well, I should say ex-U.S. generals, people like Ben Hodges. And I do sometimes wonder, what planet they're on.
Yeah. All right, that is everything. Thank you, everybody, for your questions.